warm round of applause to take care of us.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you all for being here this morning. Funny thing happened on my way to the nonprofit world. I didn't really set out to become a nonprofit administrator when I went off to college a couple of decades ago. Actually, I wanted to be second in command of a major corporation. Didn't want to be top dog. I wanted to be Spock, not Kirk. But ultimately, what I found is that my background of, I have degrees in management and journalism, and then got a library science master's degree, which gave me a lot of research experience that was combined with my desire to really give back to my community, really fitted me well for being in the nonprofit realm. And so my first venture into the nonprofit world was as the librarian for a school for kids with learning differences, and ended up working my way up to administration in that field, and then ended up working for a Medicaid HMO as their corporate librarian and working in that field. And then that's when my family decided to move to Buena Vista. And my first job in Buena Vista was not in nonprofits. It was for the government. I was the librarian at the prison in Buena Vista. And I learned an awful lot, not so much about being a librarian, not even so much about prison work, but I learned a lot about myself working as a woman in a men's prison. And I have an inmate named Larry Lee to thank for pretty much the rest of my story, which is once you face your deepest fears, then everything else is really easy. The policy in the prisons was if a prisoner, an inmate, marked a book, tore a book, in any way damaged a book, you would charge their account $2. Well, since a prisoner makes 60 cents a day, $2 amounts to over 3 days' wages. And a book that Larry Lee returned came back damaged, and so I had to charge his account. And he was not happy. And he was about this tall, full of muscles, full of tattoos, and full of anger. And he came to the library to plead his case, as it were, about how I was wrong, and he needed to have that charge reversed. And I stood my ground. And in that moment, I defined myself as someone who could stand her ground in the face of what I felt was actually a physical threat. And so from there, it's about just 6 months later, I believe it was, that I ran for town council in Buena Vista. And won. There were 8 of us running for 4 positions, and I got one of those 4 positions. Found that I was pretty good at being on town council, and then 2 years later ran for mayor. I ran unopposed. If you can do it, run unopposed. I have since run for another office as county clerk, and I was going against the incumbent, didn't win that one. But it's definitely easier not to have to campaign. You just, get to put your face out there, your name out there, and they say, she can't mess it up too bad. And so I ran actually twice unopposed and won both times, obviously. And since we moved to Buena Vista, though, as Tom says, my husband is a visionary. The way I describe our relationship is that I'm Winnie the Pooh and he's the balloon. And so I managed to keep him from flying off, and he occasionally managed to pull my feet off the ground. And so I think a little higher, a little bigger than I would have if I weren't associated with him. He has been planning this flight around the world really ever since I met him. And I told him finally this year, I said, you know what? You're not getting any younger, and av fuel's not getting any cheaper. So you might as well just go for it. And so he is going for it. And for someone like him who dreams big dreams and has great ideas, to have to put up with the bureaucracy of working with the various governments and permittings and so forth that you have to do in order to do a venture like this has really been a stretch. And I can tell you that the United States bureaucracy is the worst in the world. The permitting for going across the South Pole has been really the most difficult. He got some good news yesterday from the Chilean government that they are going to allow him to land there for whatever he might need, shelter, lodging, whatever. And of course I asked about fuel, because that's the biggest thing, is getting the fuel in order to go across the South Pole. And he said, well, as long as we can ship it there, they don't have fuel themselves, but they would allow him to refuel there. So that's been good news. And so anyway, we're hoping We were originally planning to launch. It's called worldflyers.org, if any of you want to look it up online. Hoping to launch that on November 4th, but it's looking more like it'll be next spring, maybe April. Yes, Bob?
Being a pilot, I'd like to know what kind of plane it is.
He's flying a Queen Air, is what his original plan is. Now, since he's got 6 more months, he's going to look at maybe something that's a little more fuel efficient.
You land on the Antarctic, you said?
Well, it's around the world over both. It's a circumpolar expedition. In order to set the record, you have to cross over the 0 mark on both poles, and you have to cross the equator at least 120 degrees apart.
One word of advice: don't trust your compass.
Yeah. Well, he's gotten us an aviator's sectant already, and it's this like old-fashioned looking thing. It's sitting on our counter, and it will eventually be in the plane, of course. But because when you do get to the top, you don't know where you are. So one of the things I discovered is that the South Pole is actually a plateau at 9,500 feet. So all his experience of high-altitude flying there in Buena Vista will really come in handy. This isn't the first venture like that we've done. Shortly after we moved to Buena Vista, we launched a nonprofit called SkyArk for the transportation of animals, generally from rescues and animal welfare organizations. Oftentimes an animal, you may have too many coonhounds in Georgia, but if you can get them up to Teterboro or New Jersey, then they're a hot property, and so moving them around can be helpful. Unfortunately, that market's a little underfunded during these economic times, and I'm sure some of you have found that with your dreams, is that if you're not in the social welfare areas, you might find it a little more difficult to get funding. Our most recent nonprofit venture is called Skyfunder, and it is, I don't know, how many of you are familiar with Kickstarter? Kickstarter.com to fund creative projects and so forth. Well, they don't allow nonprofits to post, and we thought that that was just a big area that needed to have some availability. So we launched Skyfunder this last month for promoting social causes, and so you can put on there, I'm trying to raise whatever it is, $3,000 to do whatever it is, and you send it out to your friends, and they can pledge anywhere from $10 to the whole $3,000, whatever it might be. Also allows then for churches, for families that have medical issues, for someone who wants to go back to school, if only they could pay for the books. I mean, whatever it might be, it gives you an avenue for then sending that out in a more structured way than just bulk emails. Deb? Skyfunder.com, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, so com.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, that's some about me. I can tell you that government service is a blessing and a curse. I got asked a lot when I was mayor, so do you enjoy being mayor? And there were certainly aspects of being mayor that I really enjoyed. Land use decisions was not one of them. But helping people understand how to get what they want and work through the system and let government get out of the way was a big draw for me. All right. Well, Tom already had you introduce yourselves, but I'm going to, I don't know how many of you need paper if you've got something to take notes on. I would like you to dream some big dreams here. Bob, you want to take a piece of paper and pass it on? Sounds like many of you are here and you have a background more in a for-profit industry, but I'm guessing that all of you are somehow involved with a nonprofit of some kind, whether that might be a 501c3 or a church or a school, maybe a government project you'd like to see done. If you could raise $100,000 and you could do with it whatever you wanted, how would you use that? Why don't you take a minute and think about that? Mike, I think we're going to start with you. What would you spend the $100,000 on? And for what organization?
This would be regarding the River Corridor campaign. I officially started a nonprofit. I developed a website that I already have with greater presence. Hired a consultant for looking at that website regarding the user experience and building traffic and subscription. I fund myself with a small salary, a little stipend to run that. I reach out to the local schools and engage the students with some promotional awards on iPad or something to get them involved in some things. I hire a graphic artist to design a professional looking logo, I would hold a promotional event to engage the community. And if I could justify it, I'd actually create a physical presence, bricks and mortar kind of headquarters or something that people could engage. That's what I would do.
Well, as we can see, there's no shortage of ways to spend the money. Just figuring out then, who do we convince that this is a cause worthy of their money? What we're going to look at today are ways to increase your resources by building relationships, improving your grant writing skills, and then maximizing the use of your volunteers. And these, of course, will be income focused, and this is on reducing expenses. When Tom and Deb asked me to do this presentation, they initially asked me to focus on grant writing tips. And I insisted on broadening that to being more than just about grant writing and fundraising in that way, but also then friend-raising. One of the things that is really important when you are doing the work you're doing is that if you're not having any fun talking to people about it, then you're not doing it right. Because it really should, I could tell going around the room, you guys are passionate about these causes and what you want to accomplish with the dreams you have for that $100,000. There's no reason to feel shy about sharing that with anyone you run into. And so we're going to practice that in a little bit. Why do you focus on people? Why not just grants? Well, according to Giving USA, these are the figures from 2010, 73% of all contributions to nonprofits came from individuals. Another 8% came from bequests, which of course are former individuals. So if you put those two together, that's 81% of all the dollars in 2010 given to nonprofits came from people, not from foundations. Foundations contributed 14%, corporations 5%. Well, you think to yourself, well, okay, that's 2010. It's still, we're in the depths of a recession. It doesn't seem to be getting any better. Well, don't foundations have more money? Maybe, maybe not. What the data shows is that in 2010, giving by individuals rose almost 3%. So even when people are hurting economically, they're still giving to causes they believe in. Foundations, their giving remains steady. And a lot of that, of course, has to do with the fact that the money that they have invested isn't growing at the rate that it used to be, and so they're being more cautious. And I mean, that's their choice. But the reality is, the reason why you should go to people is because people give. And in Colorado, they give more than they do in other states. And so you need to have some plan for reaching those people. And that plan is your elevator speech. Oops. Now it's frozen, Tom. I can't get it to move. Okay. How many of you have ever been in a situation where someone you knew had money was right in front of you, and if only you could get your words together, you could maybe make a connection, and maybe not get the money right then, but relationships, they start off with that first date, and then you build from there. You have to have some way to engage that interest. And so, when we first introduced ourselves at the beginning of this session, everybody said who they are and what they do, or what organization they're working with, what freelance opportunities they're looking for, that sort of thing. What if you reframed that with what you hope to accomplish or how that other person might help you? So if you look at some of the examples on here, okay, you're in an elevator and in walks a program officer or a local philanthropist you've been trying to reach for months. You've got 15 seconds to describe your project. What do you say in the short time that you've got them? You know, you could just say your name and what you do, or you could switch it around and talk about what you're accomplishing. So instead of just saying, hi, I'm Jasmine Renfro and I'm the Executive Director of Kids Need Us, say, hi, I'm Jasmine Renfro, I'm the Executive Director of Kids Need Us. We work with at-risk elementary school kids, providing homework help and mentoring after school in Northwest Fort Collins. I'm glad we finally got a chance to meet. Do you have a quick second to chat? Or may I call you at your office? What time is best? You see how you've gone straight from introducing yourself, what it is that you're trying to accomplish, and then trying to close the deal to at least set up a time to talk later. Okay, next example. Hi, my name's Michael Jasper. I'm with the Front Range Senior Center. I help patients and their families deal with the impacts of Alzheimer's by providing case management, family counseling, and respite care. Do you have a couple of minutes to see if some of our programs might be of interest to your foundation? How many of you live in the Denver area, so you may not be aware of this, of Rural Philanthropy Days? What it amounts to is because so much funding from the foundations tends to happen in the Front Range area, I can't remember the name of the organization now. I know Anschutz's Family Foundation is a part of it, but there's an organization that helps put it out there. They have every 4 years, regions will get together, and then the foundations come in, and you basically do what's called, well, they call them roundtables, but it's speed dating with funders. And so you get to make your pitch. You know, there's only like 8 seats at the table. You're only going to get a half an hour for all 8 of you to pitch this funder. You tell them what it is you're doing, and then they'll give you a green light, yellow light, or red light about whether or not you're a good match. Imagine yourself then in that elevator is just like speed dating. You get a chance to make your pitch that quick. So I want you guys to pair up, either the front back row, or next to each other, and give the 15-second speech you would give to somebody on an elevator that you think might be your next best bet toward that $100,000.
It's easy. Okay. I am operating and our simple goal is to accomplish and make a.
How hard was this to do?
Very hard. That was difficult.
What was the hard part?
Be concise. I mean, my biggest thing was to be concise and not find myself justifying what it is I'm doing, but pitching.
Mine was to try to talk about what you do without sounding or feeling like you're bragging. I mean, you are, because if it's the truth, you are, but it's very difficult to talk about, here's what we do, and not sound like, wow, look at us, aren't we great? You know what I
That's
mean?
not bragging if you can back it
Well,
up.
exactly, but it still can feel that way.
And if you meet a program officer from some foundation or some government connection that's going to have some grant monies that you might want to pitch for, you're going to have to engage them quickly. It's like, oh, Joe Smith, I've been hoping to get a hold of you guys. I want to talk to you about an idea that I've been working on, and if we could get some grant monies, we'd be able to accomplish the list. I mean, it can be just that quick a transition, but you have to be in the frame of mind that you're going to attract that money, that you're going to pitch for whatever your idea is, that even if you're tired because you didn't have your coffee yet, or you were thinking about something else because, you're running late for an appointment, you can't miss those opportunities. And you have to be willing anywhere, anytime, because those opportunities may present themselves anywhere, anytime. And you don't know, because of networking, the 6 degrees of separation, and all of that, they might not be the right person, but they know the right person. And then the next thing that you want to think about too, if it's not just making a pitch to somebody you don't know well, but someone who's maybe a warm lead or warm contact, is don't just tell them how you would put them in to work in your organization or what you need most and gee, can't you fit into that box? Allow them to tell you how they see themselves being involved in your organization. That's really important, especially in this day and age with not only the variety of talents that are out there, but the connections that are out there, the time constraints that people have. They might be willing to do, I could maybe host an event for you, or I might be willing to write a letter and send it out to my friends, or I might be willing to put you in touch with my brother's cousin who, whatever. I mean, it's just like whatever they can do for you, let them pick and choose what they can do for you. Where I'm currently working is a community-supported safety net clinic for the uninsured in Chaffee County who meet our income guidelines. And there's some amazing talent out there, but most of my volunteers travel a lot. They go to see their grandkids a lot. And so if I try to put them into something that's there all the time, that doesn't work for me. But I have one who's an IT whiz, and so I just send him my questions when I need him, and that's been real helpful too. The other thing to keep in mind is those volunteers, they already love you. Don't be afraid to ask them for money, because if they're already supporting you with some time, they're definitely willing to support you with some money. I had a handout here, because I didn't get to Kinko's in a timely fashion yesterday. I didn't get it photocopied, but it's called Finding Your Inner Fundraiser. Everybody in this room can be a fundraiser, no matter how shy you are, no matter how ill-equipped you are for sales. A lot of it's just practice and figuring out what it is you're going to ask and who you're going to ask it of. Speaking of asking, how many of you have done any kind of research or studying on generational differences? How easy is it to get millennials to contribute to nonprofits and causes? Nonprofits? Harder. Causes? Yes. Especially if their friends are all about that. So if you've got a sphere of influence that includes a younger generation, make sure you ask them, if you're excited about us, please tell your friends. Do you have friends who you think might be involved? One of the ideas that I have, I think it's on the next screen. There we go. Fundraising ideas, house parties. The organization that I work for, we did a house party about a year ago. And what a house party is, it's like a dinner party, only the invitation says you're going to be pitched for giving a donation to a cause I really believe in. And we ended up raising a little over $3,000 for one evening. And that was basically, the host sent out the invitations, she cooked the meal, she made the guest list, I showed up and did my pitch for 10 minutes and then just really got to enjoy a party, and we made $3,000. That was easy money. I mean, I think about some of the other events we've done. I mean, everything from concerts that, you're going to get a portion of the profits or whatever. All the preparation, all the planning, all the marketing. And I really didn't raise as much money as basically just letting this lady have a party, share her excitement with her friends, and then they got out their checkbooks. It was really that easy.
Can I ask you a question? Do you have to be a nonprofit to accept grants and apply for grants or to accept money from people?
I would say 85 to 90% of the time, yes. To get money from people, no. If they want a tax write-off, yes.
Right,
But
okay.
many people give, and it has nothing to do with whether or not they're going to get a tax write-off. And that's where, I mentioned the website that my husband and I started called Skyfunder. If people might give to a friend who's like having a medical situation or whatever, they'll give the money even though there's not a tax write-off involved. But if you're going to write for grants or any other kind of more formalized, then yes, generally you have to have a nonprofit.
That should be done first,
Mhm.
completed first.
Mhm.
Thank you.
And you can have your 501c3 status pending. You have filed that and just be honest with the funder, and they may just say, well, we may approve you, but you don't actually get the monies until you've passed that. What does anybody know the number one area of focus that gets the most donations out of that 73, 81% from individuals and bequests? Where does 45% of that money go to? What kind of organizations? Religious organizations. Why do you suppose religious organizations get so much money that way?
Exposure.
They ask every week.
True.
2,000 years of practice.
They have, practice helps. Practice and asking. If somebody has already said yes to your organization once, now you don't want to ask them necessarily every week like the religious organizations do, but don't be afraid to ask monthly, quarterly. If you put out a monthly newsletter or email blast or something like that, that you can say, and by the way, we're still doing a challenge grant or a matching grant or whatever it might be, or we're still fundraising to get hose carts restored or whatever your project might be. Again, this is the area that I thought, both for those with significant contacts, a really nice Rolodex of friends, or again, the younger generations where they'll give if their peers tell them that, yes, I've had contact with this organization, they really do what they say they're going to do. I think you ought to consider that too. And they'll do that through tweets, they'll do it through emails, they'll do it face-to-face. I say letter on there, that's really kind of passé for that generation. Let them communicate however they're going to communicate. Other ideas, of course, eBay has a section called Mission Fish, where, especially in this economy where people have maybe less cash available, but they've got stuff, and maybe they would sell their stuff to benefit you, you can qualify for Mission Fish, or ask people to sell their stuff on Craigslist and donate the profits to you, however that might work for you. And then again, just if you go to doing presentations, because a lot of this is just face-to-face, getting out there, community outreach. I live in a county that's got 17,000 people in it. We have 3 Rotary clubs, the Optimists, a service organization. Wherever I can pitch, I pitch. And I do it more than once a year to the same organization, just to remind them I'm there. And at the end, I say, you know, if anybody's interested in making a donation, I'd be happy to take it. And then usually about that time, the person who invited me to be the speaker says, hey, let's just pass the hat. And, you know, you get some money that way, but then ultimately you get them thinking about giving money to your organization. Again, it's coming down to people, relationships, and you have to allow people to give to you. Again, when you get back to the fears, like I said, you know, Larry Lee helped me get over that fear. You have to get past the fear of asking. It's your job to ask. It's their job to decide. You know, and if you ask them, you're giving them an opportunity then to participate in the wonderful, wonderful work that you guys are doing, whether that's helping kids learn or helping military families adjust. I mean, whatever that is, you're giving them a chance to be a part of that. All right. Any questions about some of the ways that you can raise friends, make contacts, raise the money that way? Mike?
What would you, if, with respect to getting people aligned with how they can help you, how do you connect with what their passion is in trying to help you? In other words, they want to reach out and do service to the community, or how do you find that connection, or how do you target? Yeah.
Well, partly when you bring up the discussion of what it is you do, then you have to shut up and listen. Because either they will tune you out and say, well, it was nice to meet you, and take off, or they'll say, oh, yeah, that's really cool, I'm working on, and then you can maybe come up, you know, that's one of the values, I think, of the vault space. Just all those ideas bouncing around together. Not only do you make the connection with each other, but you make connections maybe with an even greater piece of the pie. So, all right, well, we'll take a 15-minute break and meet back here, and then we'll talk about. I sold you on the fact that 81% of your funds will probably come from people, not from foundations. But even so, I want to talk some about grant writing, because multiple streams of income are always a good thing. In addition, of course, to donations from individuals and donations from foundations, you can make pitches to corporations who oftentimes will either have a foundation of their own or simply will do sponsorships or make an outright donation. And also for some of your organizations, you may have fee-for-service income that you can count on. You know, if you're a nonprofit school, you may be charged tuition. If you're a health clinic, you charge a fee to come there. I mean, it just depends on, you know, I worked for a historical society. We had museums. We charged admission, so it's fee-for-service income. And so you will have some availability to do that. Okay. There are 2 different kinds of readers who will be reading an application that you may pitch to a funder. One cares all about the numbers, and the other one is looking to have their heart touched. You have to be able to write a grant application that does both of those things well. One of the, well, I guess step 1, though, is to make sure that whatever you send, it could be the most perfectly written grant application in the world. And I was talking with Steve about this earlier this morning when we were setting up. You could have a perfectly written grant application, but if it's a highly competitive grant round, you may still not get funded. So it's sort of like having a resume. A resume just gets you the interview. It doesn't necessarily get you the job. You can have a perfect grant application and it still wouldn't necessarily get you the funding. And that is part of the difficulty about getting funding from through grants instead of through people is that it's easier to just go back time and time again to perfect your pitch in talking to people, and also because there are more of them. With grant funders, if you make a pitch and they say no, then you oftentimes can't ask again for another year, and so you really have to be very careful when you're doing that. When I say research for a good fit, how many of you are familiar with the Colorado Grants Guide? It is put out annually every year. Well, obviously it's annually, both in print form and as online, so that you can put in your search parameters. And it will tell you, you can find out not only funders who are based in Colorado, but funders who are based outside of Colorado who make grants inside Colorado. It'll have corporations who again may have a foundation here. Oftentimes the corporations who would give money through grants, it's for wherever they're located. So for instance, Xcel Energy has such a foundation. They're located in my county, they're located in Salida, but not Buena Vista. So whatever pitch I would make to them, I would have to make sure I talk about how those funds would be spent in that part of the community that they care about, not necessarily in the other part where they're not. In Buena Vista, we have Sangre de Cristo Electrical Association, which has a different foundation. So I make pitches for money that will be spent in that clinic. The other part of being a good fit, though, is that look at what they primarily fund. They'll have secondary areas. My experience with those secondary areas as they're listed in the Colorado Grants Guide is that, yes, they may, for instance, do animal welfare. But it's only because one of their board members has a very specific nonprofit that they really love, and so they give every year to that. Well, they have to write that down as a secondary area, but it may not really be open for new animal welfare organizations to pitch. And so you would be, it would do you well to call them ahead of time. And that's the other part of your research. How many of you think of foundations and grant funders as like kings on top of the mountain, handing out their largesse? They really are partners. If you're going to touch their heart and make them a part of your passion, your dreams, your mission, what you're trying to accomplish, then don't be so scared by them. They're just people. They want to know that the money that they're spending is going to be spent in ways that meet the criteria and the guidelines that their foundation has, their funding priorities. And so talk to them about that. It's like, I would really like to approach the, say, Anschutz Family Foundation for a grant, and this is what I'm thinking of. Do you think that would be a good fit? Do you think that would be worth my time to submit to you? Because it takes a long time to write a grant. Even once you get your basics down, it takes a while to put all the pieces together, update it, make sure you've got the right budget figures and all of that. You don't want to waste that time sending it to a grant funder that's not a good fit for you. Okay? When I say perfect the pieces, the grant attachments, how many of you are familiar with the common grant application that's used in Colorado? About 10 or 12 years ago, some of the major foundations in Colorado got together and they realized that part of what made it difficult for nonprofits to write grants was that every funder wanted something different. They wanted it packaged a different way. They asked different questions. And so they got together and created sort of the skeleton of what they could all agree on really needed to be in a grant application, and it's called the Common Grant Application. And if you Google it, it's really easy to find. And in that, though, it will have not only the areas that should be in the body of your grant, the narrative, the history, the governance, how your organization is governed, how you use volunteers, what the programs are, how you evaluate whether you're actually meeting your mission. But the attachments that go with that, of course, would include your 501c3 IRS determination letter, but also the budget. I heard Matt Carpenter of El Pomar do a presentation last spring on the grants that he sees come across his desk. And he said one of his biggest pet peeves is people will say in the body of the narrative, I'm asking for $10,000 for whatever. And then in the budget, there's a disconnect because the money they've put in that they're asking for doesn't connect with the $10,000 that they mentioned. So which is it? You're asking for $10,000 or you're asking for the, say, 15 or the 17.5 or whatever it is that you've got in your budget. Make sure those things match up. And if you have budgets that maybe show a negative at the end of the year, make sure you point out that you do have money in reserve from last year that you're going to spend. So it's not just that, yeah, we're just like on a wing and a prayer, we're hoping you give us money because otherwise we grind to a halt in September. Just say, you know, we hope not to dip into our strategic reserves, and your grant will make that possible. It'll help us preserve our strategic reserves for, you know, for next year, and when who knows what else is going to happen. One of the things that is difficult about grants, and it depends on your organization, how many people are in it, and you may even be this person. When I worked for the School for Kids with Learning Differences, the program director, much like Tom, always had lots of ideas, but he wanted to do them tomorrow. You can't fund tomorrow's dream that fast with a grant, because they only accept them at certain times during the year. Even if they accept them year-round, they'll decide monthly, and then you won't actually get the funds probably for another 2 months past that. And so you really need to be looking at more long-range, I guess long-range depends on your perspective, but you need to be looking at what you're going to fund that you don't need that money until maybe 6 months from now. Because, you know, especially because if you really need it tomorrow and you apply and don't get it, then you're out of business. And again, that's where making a pitch to people is a lot faster. You can send out a, you know, emergency letter. You know, we have this opportunity, and if only we raise $1,200 by the end of the month, then we'll be able to, you know, secure, I don't know, whatever it is, secondhand dog food that will help our shelter because, you know, it's pink and dogs don't care what color it is, but they can't, you know, sell it if it's pink. Again, the passion plus the particulars has to do with what I was saying. You have to not only get in the verbiage why what you're doing is important, but also then the specifics about it. The thing I want to caution you, though, about is these grant funders get hundreds of grants a year. Get to the point. You know, don't be like a high school kid writing for his teacher who's just trying to fill some sort of word quotient and blather on. Get right to the point. And again, as part of your elevator speech, you know what it is you want to do. Tell them how they can help you get there. Tell them how you'll know when you get there. I believe the Common Grant application asks for all of that, the words part to be no more than 4 pages. And I have turned in grants that were 2.5 pages because I said everything I needed to say. And I got it in. Proofreading. Of course, this is a little embarrassing since on my opening slide I had that today was 2012, but you need to make sure that somebody else reads your grant before it goes out. Once you've done your Common Grant application, though, you can again, you know, kind of repurpose that for multiple grant funders. Even if there is a grant funder that does not accept the Common Grant application, the pieces are all going to be there. You've already talked about your mission. You've already talked about your governance. You already talked about your program. And so you can pick the pieces and put them in where the grant funder that doesn't accept the Common Grant application wants them. The other thing that's really helpful about doing grant writing, and I alluded to this in the PR that DaVinci put on its website, is that once you've got that stuff all written, you can use it in thank you letters, you can use it in annual fund mailings, you can use it in brochures, you can use it on your website, because if you have somehow worked through the words to really sell somebody on why you're wonderful, why wouldn't you sell everybody on how you're wonderful? And so you can pick those pieces apart. So even if you end up not necessarily thinking that grant funding will be a real good stream of income for you, the process of going through that and the words you end up with at the end can be very helpful for repurposing later. When I said you needed to be a good fit, these are the things that funders are looking for. So if you don't have these yet, and I've got another handout here that you, can help you figure out what pieces you need to pull together before you can write a really good grant. But that you need to make sure that whatever it is you do whether it's education, economic development, human services, whatever, meets that grant funders guidelines. It has to be in an area that they care about. You here in the front, on the Front Range have more opportunities because of some community foundations than we do in Chaffey County. We just this last year got a Chaffey County community fund, but it doesn't have any money yet. So it's not like the Denver Foundation that funds nonprofits in Denver, or some of the ones in other parts of the country. Obviously, Summit Foundation funds things in Summit County. Again, make sure that what you're planning to do matches theirs. Geographic focus. If their populations too can also refer to if they're interested in at-risk, low-income, minorities, women, various religions, that sort of thing. Being able to point out how pressing this need is going to be another part of the passion that you'll be able to bring to what you're writing in your grant proposal. Competence, that's a tricky one, especially if you're new. Now, if you're applying for startup funds or seed money, then at least give some idea of what you've done in the past. But if you've been doing this for a while, be sure to be able to point out to the successes you've had. And accountability is another big piece, of course, is they want to know that when it's time to do the report a year from now, that you're still going to be around to do that. Sustainability has been a tough one for us, I know at least this last year, is that if you have, the organization I work for now, we just celebrated our 5th anniversary. Most of the money we got up front was to sustain us for 3 years. So we've gone past that 3-year mark, but now to get more grants, they want to know, well, at what point are you going to stop needing so much grant funding? Because it was 85% grant funded for its first 4 years of operation. And so it will always be primarily grant funded, but I'm trying to get that down to more like 65% and bring the rest up with donations and corporations and corporate sponsorships and so forth. And then being realistic about your goals and budget. That first exercise where I had you guys figure out how you're going to spend $100,000, if you don't need $100,000, don't put that down. If what you really need is $22,500, put that down. Let's see how ready you guys are for writing a grant. Now, I know many of you don't actually have a nonprofit that you're working with, or you're thinking about starting one, but you don't have it yet. So most of the items on this list you don't have yet. But from the get-go, these are the things you should be working on getting. And there are a number of resources out there for helping build a nonprofit organization if you're going to do that from the ground up. And that we can talk about those later if you'd like. But the main thing is you have to have an actual organization. That's what all these things are designed to point out, that it wasn't just one guy with an idea who created a nonprofit that he's the only member of. I mean, you really have to have a full-fledged organization to make these work. My experience, again, with nonprofits shows that not only do you need to consider the funder your partner, you're asking them for money, and this is true whether we're talking about grant writing or people, individuals that you're asking for money from, is be honest with them. Don't stretch the truth and overpromise, because at the end of that grant cycle, you're going to have to write a report, and you're going to be evaluated on what you said you would do. And so make sure that whatever deliverables that you have promised in the grant contract are things that you think you can really attain. Don't, like in our case, we wouldn't want to say that we're going to be able to reach twice as many people over the next year. Well, if their money's not going to give me more staff to reach those underinsured clients, then I'm not going to be able to double my numbers. But I might be able to increase it by, say, 5 to 10% through efficiencies, through outreach and marketing, through whatever other means I can do. So just make sure that it meets up with the truth. And if you get partway through the grant cycle and something unexpected happens, give them a call. Don't wait until the end of the grant cycle where you're going to have to write this report and then try to figure out how in the world am I going to break it to them that 6 months ago we lost our executive director and we weren't able to replace them because we didn't have enough money, or whatever, because we live in a small community and there aren't as many resources. Questions?
We're usually keeping in contact with at the funding organization.
When you receive a grant, you will be given a program officer that is your contact. And because, like in our case, we had a foundation funded us for a 3-year cycle, my program officer changed over the course of that 3 years because they have turnover at these places, just like anywhere else. You know, they have moves within their organization. But they'll let you know who it is you're supposed to talk to. And oftentimes, of course, they're the people who've come out and done the site visit, so they know more about you. So the site visit can be another really fun thing because, again, that's the chance to be face-to-face in your environment, showing them, you know, these are the cubbies where the kids come in for the after-school program and they get to put their stuff down, and then they come over here and we help them with their homework. Or this is our warehouse of supplies that have been donated for the military families to make those transitions. Whatever your organization does, that's your chance to really, again, share that passion. And it's the same kind of visit you might have with a group of individuals, you know, through maybe an event that you hold. It's like, hey, come learn more about the XYZ agency. We'd really like to show you what we do. And then you can bring in people and say, so how do you see yourself involved with our organization? You don't necessarily pitch them for money at that time. So I know I'm kind of bouncing back and forth, but it's all people. That's what I'm trying to get at. Generally, what you're trying to accomplish with your organization has to do with people, and the only way to make that happen is to work through people. You know, those funders are either foundations, businesses run by people, or they're people giving their own hard-earned cash. Okay, questions about grant writing? And I hate to disparage Mr. Lesko, but I really wouldn't put too much stock in the books that he sells. And partly because the stuff he's telling you is all available for free on the internet, which the inmates didn't have access to, but you do.
Writing a grant on how to do that.
One question I have is about the difference between grants and sponsorship. And because it always tends to blur with some of the stuff that we're doing, because it just seems like the sponsorship seems like a more equitable relationship with them.
It is. Well, sponsorship, the question is that what's the difference between grants and sponsorship? Well, sponsorship generally comes from a company, corporation of some sort, who of course has their own agenda for wanting to sponsor you. And more, they want more than just a sign at the back of your conference. They want more than just their name on a mug that you're going to hand to the participants. They want more. They want more of a say. They want more of a partnership. They have their own ideas. In fact, almost to the point now where the only events they sponsor are really the events they create. Okay, well, some of the resources, as long as we've got a little bit of time before our next break, it's called boardresource.com, boardresource.org. Blue Avocado, and I think it's .org. I can't remember if that's .org or .com. And crcamerica.org, and I can't remember what the CRC stands for, but they're the ones who do the Colorado Grants Guide.
Blue Avocado, is that a .org as well?
I think it's a .org. Okay, that one I'm signed up for a newsletter, so I don't have to actually access it separately. It just comes to me. And then, of course, there's the NOLO series, the same folks who do the, you know, how to take your landlord to court and how to file for adoption, also have a how to set up a nonprofit. And you might find that actually in the reference section of a library.
NOLO?
N-O-L-O. Mm-hmm. That's the name of the publishing company. There's also a dummies guide.
Oh,
And
well, there we go.
so I'm not a big fan of the dummies. I'm not a big fan of the dummies guides because they're not arranged in a way that my mind works. So I don't use those much, but I know that they're out there. All right, well, we'll take another 15-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll talk some more. I want to talk a little bit about not so much the revenue side, but the expense side. When we went around with that first exercise and you all said what you would spend your $100,000 on, many of you talked about getting some things accomplished that I believe you could get accomplished through volunteer support. Whether that would be website creation or marketing campaigns or even just boots on the ground getting things distributed. And so I want to talk a little bit about what we can do with volunteers in 2011. Okay. How many of you either when as a parent or maybe when you were a kid, your parents volunteered for the schools? Maybe in PTA or whatever, and they'd show up every week. They were maybe the library lady, and they made sure all the books got back on the shelf, or they helped with lunchroom monitor, or they helped with the weekly homework help after school, or whatever it might be. But they showed up faithfully, the same time, the same place, did the same thing every week, or every month, or however often it happened. That is very, very uncommon these days to find in a volunteer. People travel a lot. They don't know, they just don't want to be tied down to some sort of a schedule. And if you look at the younger generations, the folks who are, say, in their 20s, it's hard to get them to volunteer per se at all. That's just not something that they grew up with, although that's starting to change because more and more schools are including a community service component in their high school curriculum, and so they're getting more of that experience again. But if you can find ways that as a one-shot, a one-off, something maybe just like an ad hoc committee or a specific task you need done that a volunteer can do for you, figure out things that you need done that otherwise you'd have to pay for. There are a lot of people who are either unemployed or underemployed in this economy, and you are giving them an opportunity to keep their skills sharp. I think especially of the IT folks who are out of work. If they're just sitting at home or doing whatever they're doing, a month is a lifetime in IT work. And so if you're giving them an opportunity to keep their skills sharp, something they can put on a resume, gets them back out in the community, because then maybe once they've volunteered to do your website, or they've volunteered to help set up your email system, or whatever it is that you're going to ask of that volunteer, then you invite them to various functions, maybe pro bono, and then they get a chance to network, and that would also be a benefit to them. You have other people in your communities. Chaffee County, and especially the north end of it where I live, of course I'm biased, but I call it the Buena Vista Brain Trust. I think we have more retired PhDs than anywhere else in Colorado. And so I'd love to tap into some of those folks to find out what they could bring to my organization that otherwise I wouldn't have access to, either because I couldn't afford it or because I wouldn't even know where to go look for it. So consider the specialized talents you may need for your organization that somebody right in your backyard is really good at. I have this one woman in our organization who volunteers, and she has experience converting systems from paper records into electronic medical records. Well, guess what I just got a grant for from the Colorado Rural Health Center this last year? Implementing electronic medical records. So she's one of the first people I went to say, hey, can you help me with this conversion process? Now, even though she's been out of the game for about 5 or 10 years, she knows the process, even if she doesn't know the particulars of this software. And I've never done this before. That's not my area of expertise, and so that's something that I can call on her as a volunteer to do. Is she going to show up every week or even once a month to be one of our front desk volunteers who check in the patients and then file the papers and do all that? No. But for this one task, she's especially well suited.
Now, if your grant had a request for that specific skill, could you pay her for it? I mean, just in a situation, would that be part where then you would take some of that money and pay her?
The question is whether or not I can use grant monies to pay for somebody who's a specialized volunteer. And that's up to the volunteer. Yes, if you do have monies budgeted for that already, then yes, you can. If this person doesn't want the monies, because I have another volunteer who's helping with the process that I was going to give her a stipend, if I pay her then she loses some sort of deal she's got on her malpractice insurance. She's a volunteer physician for us. And so she can't take that stipend. So I'm going to take the money I was going to spend on her and spend it on somebody else doing something similar but not quite the same. But again, that's a conversation I have with my grant funder to make sure that they're okay with that, before you make a decision, because they're my partner. So you just want to make sure that whatever you're doing with that money is something that the funder is okay with. Other specialized talents. Think about the stuff that, by and large, cause you brain damage. Stuff you don't want to do. I mean, some of it's just like you don't want to file it. Believe me, I'm a librarian. I hate filing. I get piles of papers. I don't like to file. I have one volunteer. She loves that job. She says, call me up. Once a month, I'll come in and I'll do your filing for you. She's the former board president. So she knows our organization. She knows where these papers ought to go, which ones go together. She knows which ones, like, you know what? You really have 2 previous drafts of this grant. I'm just going to throw these other 2 away. This is really the final version we send in. It's like, I wouldn't have known that. I've only been there a year and a half. She's got the experience and the desire. Figure out what it is you really don't want to do. Stuff you're not very good at. Stuff that you really have to, I don't know, either have lots of coffee or an amp or something to get up the energy to do something. Find out if there's a volunteer who enjoys that sort of thing, who enjoys data analysis, who enjoys writing, who enjoys greeting people. I mean, that's one of the things that I find I really don't like doing at events, is being the front desk person who greets every person as they come in. But I've got volunteers that's what they love to do. In fact, I recently lost a front desk volunteer who wanted to go work for the visitor center, which is also run by volunteers, because she gets to meet even more people that way, because that's what she likes to do. But again, you have to consider the generational differences between what many of my volunteers are over 60 versus some of my younger volunteers that I'm not now starting to pull in because they have the IT capabilities. I've got one high school student who we got a grant from a local organization to hire an intern. So she worked for us 2 summers ago, and now she still volunteers for us. And she's a senior this year, and she's already been accepted to the college she's going to go off to, and I'm glad for her, but sad for us. She is who I have do my data entry, because even while she's in school, she can come in, late afternoon, early evening while we're still there and do my data entry, and it's 10 times faster than if I hand it to an older volunteer who has to ask every other time, now, do I have to save now? Or do I tab through this? Or do I mouse through this? She's just like, Caitlin's just done, And so consider how you might place them to be of maximum benefit to you and your organization, to free you up to do whatever it is you're best at, whether that's visioning, whether that's meeting with high-level people to move it to the next phase, whatever it might be. Tom, did you have a question?
I do, actually.
Yeah.
Are there things like volunteer organizations that will kind of manage that for you? Like for example, when I was in college, I was part of a fraternity called Alpha Phi Omega, which is a service fraternity, and co-ed, so fraternity moniker doesn't actually make sense. But the idea was that, we would have a service director, and they would find these opportunities to go volunteer at, and then you would have to do a certain number of service hours per semester as a member. So are there things like that outside of that exist that we would be able to tap into?
Again, idealist.org. And before I forget, too, I remember during the break.
I should say something like that's more local. Idealist, I've been on, and
it's national, international.
Right. So if you want to get people in your local community who are looking to volunteer that just want to volunteer but they don't know about what, is there anything like that?
Not that I'm familiar with, but I'm not very knowledgeable about the Front Range areas and where you would go for that. In my community, you put ads in the paper, or write an article in the paper. You go around to the Rotaries and the Optimists and various church clubs, or you get on the radio.
It's like a volunteer broker.
Exactly. It would to match up interests with opportunities.
Yeah, I don't know exactly where you're at, but I'm fairly sure there's a volunteer opportunities listing in the newspaper on Sundays or one particular day of the week.
But that couldn't possibly be all of them. And it also, in my opinion, doesn't get the younger reader. Younger readers don't read the print newspaper.
What's a newspaper?
Is With the Volunteer America
Volunteer Connection is the local.
and Volunteer Connection. But before I forget, during the break, you were asking about resources, and I had called it board resource. It's board source. So.
Oh, it's Community Resource Center, by the way.
There, the CRC. Thank you. Community Resource Center was the website that I had sent you to that also has the Colorado Grants Guide, and they've got a whole lot of resources that are good. So does Colorado Nonprofit Association, and that's coloradononprofits.org. It used to be CanPo, but it's not anymore. And the other pitch that I'd like to make for both using the interns or using even high school groups, I know Interact is the high school version of the Rotary Club. I think it's Rotary, it might be the Optimist. They have to do service work. But the other thing is that it's really going to renew your faith in the next generations coming up, because these kids are great. Well, because if you remember, those first two sections were about raising money. We're talking here about saving expenses. And so you have to see that as worth your time on a supervisory, managerial level. Unfortunately, that is also the part of the organization nobody wants to do, volunteer coordination.
Very emotional about this topic.
I am. You know why? Because when I first moved to Buena Vista, I volunteered for the local Humane Society. I love dogs. So, thank you, Tom. I love dogs. And so I wanted to work with the dogs. And the first day I showed up to volunteer, the manager didn't know what to do with me. So she said, well, you could go clean out the cat boxes. Not so fond of cats. So I never came back. It took me a year and a half to go back to the Humane Society. And it was all because she wasn't listening to what I wanted to do. How many of you, if you had gone to, in your looking for love phase, had gone to a bar and got somebody's phone number, would have waited a year to call? But that frequently will happen. You'll put their name on a list and then, oh, now I have an event and I need 15 volunteers to do this grunt level work. And you have no relationship with that person at all anymore. In fact, they may have moved. They may have gotten 16 other volunteer opportunities that they're working on that they don't really have time for you anymore. And so you have to just, again, mind those relationships. And it takes time. But again, remember the picture of the ATVers? Let it be fun. You have a desire to achieve something through whatever organization you're working with. If this person has shown an interest in helping you achieve that, you've already got one thing in common. You may have more things in common. It doesn't have to be I've got enough friends, I really don't need any more. It's like, okay, so don't consider them a friend, but they can still be a power partner for you in getting something accomplished. Thoughts, questions, ideas? Tom?
So one thing that we've been experimenting with is there's a site that offers the ability to do many tasks for $5. It's a site called Fiverr.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've been putting a couple different things on hiring people to help out. So as an example, they will do social media stuff. So they'll put notices up of your event or something to reach 20,000 people. Or we just had one to take our logo and to turn it into a video logo that's three-dimensional, and it's very cool. It costs us $5. And so there's all kinds of different things that you can do on that site.
For instance, you maybe have waited for someone to volunteer to do something for you that you really do need done, and it hasn't happened yet. A low-cost option may be a better bet than continuing to wait. The point is, there are 10 different ways to get done what you need to get done for either free or cheap. And you don't have to let that be a reason why you can't move forward with your dreams for your organization. All right. Again, trying to figure out what it is that you want it to do. Find out what takes up a whole lot of staff time, that if you could just free up your staff so they could do the stuff that they're really trained to do. I work again in a clinic. I have 2 staff providers that make a pretty good amount of money per hour. I don't want them doing work that a $10 employee can do, or even better yet, that a volunteer could do. You know, I really, if getting a volunteer in to do the filing for my clinic director frees her up and helps her be more efficient, then that's what I need to get done, because that's just a good use of our resources. And you have to think the same way as when you're doing that for your own nonprofit. But the other thing, even if it's only for a one-shot kind of thing, come up with a job description, because most of us like to know what the expectations are. This is one that you could use for a board member job description, so a board member knows what's expected of them. But you could just as easily, and it doesn't have to be anywhere near this long for maybe one of those episodic type volunteer positions, but you could just as easily do one that's set up for create our website, make it have this level of functionality, or create an annual fund letter by such and such a deadline that then makes a pitch for some matching grant that we have out there, whatever it might be that you want somebody to do for you. Or if you want somebody to be your social media guru, your social media advisor, or someone who is set up what those parameters are so they know what it is they're signing up for. And they can tell you whether they can or can't do that. And if then they can do most of it but not all of it, you can then find somebody else to pick up those other pieces. When it comes to volunteer orientation and training, one size does definitely not fit all. Some people have lots of time, others already have lots of understanding. For instance, they have a whole volunteer training thing now at the Humane Society in my area. I really don't think I need to go to volunteer training to learn how to walk the dogs. That's all I'm interested in doing, is coming in whenever I have a spare afternoon. I was going to go for a walk anyway. I take a dog for a walk with me. I don't think I really need extra training for that, and so they don't make us go through extra training for that. But if I'm going to be part of their event staff, or the ones that clean out the cages in the morning, there's a definite way everybody has to do it. And so just keep in mind that not all volunteers have to be trained to the same level. And again, when you ask that question, so how do you see yourself being involved with our organization? Leave yourself open up to the possibilities. There was one organization I read about where it was like a Ronald McDonald House kind of place, where a family came in and said, you know, we want to do a birthday party for kids who are here. Well, birthday party may or may not work out, because there may be nobody with a birthday during the week that these families are in the Ronald McDonald's house. But you know what? We could do a Hooray It's Summer party. And so they took their idea and plugged them into doing what they wanted to do. Was it an event that this organization had ever done before? No, but it benefited the people who were in that facility because somebody just had a heart for helping them have a party in the midst of their sadness or struggles. The other piece is that ultimately you may find nobody wants to do the grunt work. You don't want to do it, the volunteer doesn't want to do it. You may have to give up some of the fun stuff, the higher level stuff you're doing, so that, and put a staffer on the grunt work in order to achieve your goals. Because again, a lot of the volunteers who are out there, who are out of work, who are underemployed, or newly retired, have some great skills, and why would you underutilize them doing, except in my case, the filing. So, like last year, we gave all of our front desk volunteers a $5 coffee shop gift card. I mean, that's just a nice way to give back. And that way, if they say, oh, no, you don't have to give that to me, I do it because I love it. It was like, then give it to someone you think can use it. I mean, it still could be there. But again, you have to be very careful about what you give your volunteers, because many of them, if you're doing it right, many of them are also donors. Your volunteers are also donors. And so you don't want to throw that back in their face by, okay, you gave me a $25 donation, here's a $10 gift. I mean, that kind of, then I guess you really didn't need my whole $25. Next year I'll give you 15. You have to be careful with that. But again, it's about relationship, and then you'll know what kind of relationship, through that relationship, what kind of a gift would be appropriate. Okay, this is just kind of overall. This isn't just about volunteers. This is about running a nonprofit altogether in maximizing your revenue and reducing your expenses. You've got to make it easy for people to do what you want them to do. If you want them to volunteer, call them back as soon as they've gotten on the list. Get them in as soon as possible. Don't make them chase you down. If you want them to donate, give them multiple ways to donate. Go back and ask them more than once. Ask them 6 times a year. Make sure that there's a place on your website that shows exactly how they can donate. Every piece of paper that gets handed out, tell them how they can donate. If somebody comes to the front desk, make sure everyone at the front desk knows how to process a donation and how to thank the person who's made the donation. The next one is that you should memorize your wish list, because you never know when you're going to run into somebody on that elevator, at a cocktail party, at a soccer game, wherever, who might be in a position to get you what you need. I mean, even if it's a filing cabinet, you know, or it's like, wow, I wish we had a 3-handset cordless phone system in our organization. It would make it a whole lot easier. Whatever that might be, make sure you've got that wish list memorized, so that when you're somebody says, well, is there anything I can give you guys that you really need? Or if I wrote you a check today to get you something you really need a lot, what would that be? I had a donor at the Historical Society where I worked that every year would pull something off our wish list that was in the newsletter and give it to us. I mean, one year they gave us enough money to buy the chairs and tables we were asking for. Another year they gave us enough money to buy the riding lawnmower we needed for one of our properties. So, I mean, if you don't put it out there, they don't know that you need it. And so I went from a $200 donation to a $1,500 donation just because I put it out there. So, again, be passionate but succinct. You've got to be able to explain what it is you do, why it's important, why it's good for the community, why it's good for your constituents, as quickly as possible. But don't be ashamed. I mean, what you guys are talking about doing is really phenomenal stuff. I mean, I'm passionate about working with the uninsured people who live in Chaffee County, but I was also passionate about preserving and sharing the history of Chaffee County, which is what the organization was before that. And before that, I was passionate about helping kids with learning differences learn. I mean, there's lots of great causes out there. I can think of probably only about 5% of the nonprofits that are out there that I would have no interest in helping them achieve their mission. But all the rest of them are doing wonderful things. So, including the DaVinci Institute.
I was gonna say, are we in that group?
You are.
Just checking.
So one thing to keep in mind is the competition for the money. And there's a lot of people that are in competition for the money, but perhaps the biggest competition is people just doing nothing. And so it's just an apathy, not knowing about your organization. So they don't do anything with that money. And so it's available, it's out there. But
well, and as a friend of mine explained it one time, he goes ahead and participates in the buying a lottery ticket each week, because you increase your chances exponentially going from 0 tickets to 1 ticket. Now, you don't go get so much by buying 2, but if you're not even playing, you couldn't possibly win. So you need to make sure that you're out there asking for what you need.
From infinity to 1 in 5 million.
So, okay. Again, my name is Kara Russell. I do have a cell phone number with a local exchange, and that's my email address. I've got some cards up here. If you have ideas or you need some help with something, I am available. Pass those down. Okay, before we wrap up, was there a burning question you had when you signed up for this boot camp that I failed to address in some way? Nailed it. All right, well, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
thank you.